to Congress, it very quickly became apparent to me that the issue of homelessness goes far beyond what I ever knew prior to my service to the public. It also occurs to me by talking to so many different folks in the district that there's a lot of misunderstanding about homelessness, and I'm going to admit there's a lot I do not understand, but I appreciate that we have experts with us here today to help us all learn and share ideas together. Homelessness takes many different forms. We've got an illustration here of one of the forms that I think most of us recognize, and that's people that we run into on the sidewalks. And I've grown accustomed to walking the streets late at night and climbing up on a sidewalk beside someone and just trying to strike up a conversation and learn a little bit about their story and why they're there and what their hopes are and that sort of thing. But we also have the forms of camps that we see. We see tents under bridges. We hear stories of families living in cars. We hear stories of school children sleeping on couches with friends. We see that there are what I'm going to call voluntary homeless folks. We know that there are many different forms of involuntary homeless. There are folks that probably could work their way out of homelessness with the right set of circumstances, and there are folks that really feel desperate and hopeless. All of these forms, I think, are misunderstood, and we tend too often, I believe, in society to try to just use the term homelessness, and that categorizes everything, and we can't do that, because I think that as we hear from our panelists today, we're going to learn that each of those categories, and there are probably others that need to be viewed much different. I also learned in serving North Carolina's 11th District that my view of where homelessness took place was distorted. As being a businessman in Henderson County, I, of course, saw the homeless population around my businesses and other businesses in downtown Hendersonville. We all recognize what we've seen in Asheville. But after getting to learn more about the district, I recognize that it extends from Murphy, and we're blessed to have the mayor of Murphy with us today. In Pisgah National Forest, in Nantahala National Forest, in the Great Smoky Mountains, all the way to Yancey County and Burnsville, and so there's not the center population of homeless that maybe I always thought that there was. And it struck me unusual that we have so many rural communities in this 15, soon to be 16 county district that are facing this problem. And while it's the same problem, we probably have to look at it just a little bit different. I tasked my staff, and I want to point out Madeline Jackson now, wave at everybody. Last summer, after hearing from so many folks in the district, I said, Madeline, let's go to work on this. Society tends to want to look past it, turn their heads, forget that the homeless problem is there, but I don't think I would be serving the people of Western North Carolina were I to ignore the problem. And so I tasked Madeline. I said, let's go find some experts. I don't understand the problem. I don't know the solutions, but let's go find them. And Madeline has taken that task to heart, and she's met with many people in this district. She's flown down from D.C. several times and got to know these panelists quite well. And I'm excited that they're here to share their stories. My expectations of today are just that we have a dialogue. I wish that maybe we could walk away with a good hard plan and say, let's all go out and do this thing and the problem will be solved. I think that's unrealistic. I hope that we can learn from one another, that we can learn from this esteemed panel and begin to put together the ideas to help people live the lives that they would want to live in this great country. It's a travesty, and I know all of our hearts go out to those folks that are not as fortunate as most of us. And the very basic, most of us are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy. The very basic level of that hierarchy is shelter. I'm simplifying that, but we know that's at the base. And so my heart, and I'm sure your heart, and that's why you're here, is to help make a difference for those folks that need help and that can be helped. So with that, I'd like to just say that we're privileged to have such a distinguished set of panelists who represent a really diverse range of perspectives. Each will contribute a unique lens through which we can understand and address the homelessness crisis here in Western North Carolina. And I wanted to introduce these folks really quick. First, we have Captain Jonathan Brown. Captain Brown has been with the Asheville Police Department for 22 years and is the commander of the Community Engagement Division. The Community Engagement Division is the primary outreach arm of the police department and works closely with internal and external partners on issues pertaining to chronic homelessness. So thank you very much. How about a big round of applause for Captain Brown? Next to Captain Brown, we have Mayor Tim Radford, who probably doesn't make it all the way out here to Asheville very often. He's a man of many hats. He's a radio station owner, a community volunteer, and the current mayor of Murphy, North Carolina. And I was shocked to hear that Murphy experiences this problem to the degree that it does. But to Tim, all of these roles are simply different ways to serve his community while being engaged with various organizations that make a positive impact on our community. How about a round of applause for Mayor Radford? To the mayor's left is a face that most of you will recognize, Michael Woods. Mr. Woods is the president and CEO of Western Carolina Rescue Ministries in Asheville. Mr. Woods has been serving in ministry since the 90s and has been an active community member in Western North Carolina since the early 2010s, serving as the chairman of the board of Buncombe County Emergency Assistance Coordinating Network and Buncombe County appointee to the Asheville Homeless Advisory Committee. You're busy just saying those titles, aren't you? Just to name a few of the many roles that he's played in our community. What about a big round of applause for Mr. Woods? And next to Mr. Woods is Emily Ball, who is the Homeless Strategy Division Manager at the City of Asheville, and we're really pleased to have the City of Asheville represented here, where the division's focus is on fulfilling the city's responsibilities as the lead agency for the Asheville-Buncombe Continuum of Care, a collaborative planning body of local stakeholders working together to respond to homelessness. Prior to joining the city in January 2020, Emily led homeless and housing programs locally at Homeward Bound for 10 years and also worked in direct homeless services in Indiana and Connecticut before moving back home to the mountains in 2009. Big round of applause, please, for Emily Ball. And to Emily's left, we have Reverend Scott Rogers, another face most of you will recognize. You know him as a leader who engages in multiple strategies across our diverse community to bring the greatest resources to the greatest number of people in need. He does that through founding principles of ABCCM by creating opportunities for others to serve, 330 churches, 400 businesses, 5,000 volunteers, collaborating agencies, public funders, his collaborative leadership on numerous boards and his participatory management has led to numerous awards. What about a big round of applause for Reverend Rogers? And then last but certainly not least is Hendersonville's own Mayor Pro Tem, Lindsay Simpson. Ms. Simpson became involved with the community in a variety of ways after moving to Hendersonville in 2016. She's the former board president for Hands On, a children's museum in downtown Hendersonville, a member of the Kiwanis Service First Committee, and a member of the Henderson County Chamber of Commerce. We're real fortunate to have Lindsay Simpson with us. Big round of applause for Simpson. And so with that, I'm going to ask a series of questions. I'm just going to walk my way down the table here and ask each panelist a question. We're going to try to keep time, but there's no hard firm. We're going to cut you off. I want this to be a formal, free-flowing conversation as best we can. I would ask that you try to limit your answer to about 3 minutes, if you can do that. And then after you answer the question, I'm going to see if anybody else on the panel would have a follow-up to that, and we'll give you a couple minutes to do that. And we're going to try to move along at a pace where we'll have maybe about 15 minutes at the end of the hour to take questions from the audience or hear anything that is on your mind. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to ask the first question of Captain Brown. What specific initiatives or programs have you implemented to foster positive interactions between law enforcement and the homeless population?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. I think first of all, we want to establish a value system within our organization where we value that person that we're interacting with. And each person that works within the Community Engagement Division, I think, has adopted that mindset. And when you have that mindset, then you're able to go out and provide a sense of compassion to that person that we're interacting with. Many times they're in crisis. And being able to recognize where they're at and not add to that crisis is important. So I think for us, it is really getting our minds right and having a value system to where when we deploy from the department, we know how we're going to interact with folks on the street, and even folks that may be dealing with some type of dependency issue, and maybe their behavior is not reciprocating the good nature that hopefully we're coming to them with, we're still able to effectively interact with that person. Once we're able to establish some form of a relationship, dialogue, and interaction, then we can start sussing out what are some of the core issues that we're dealing with. Are we dealing with a person that's maybe just hungry? Are we dealing with a person that needs a place to stay here in the moment? And then we can start facilitating solutions to those more immediate problems.
Well, thank you. Does any of the panelists have something to add to that, or perhaps you want to disagree, and that's okay too? All right. Well, thank you. Mayor Radford, I know we're all anxious to hear from a small rural community here in North Carolina's 11th district. In the last several years, there's been a dramatic increase in homelessness across the country. And this is apparently a problem across Western North Carolina, as we've been discussing, and brings us here today. What could you share about what's going on in Murphy and what's been your experience out west? And I think we're particularly interested because you represent mayors and small communities throughout District 11.
Well, first, thank you so much for calling this meeting together on a regional basis. This is something that a small town is not able to tackle and solve by itself without other communities and other voices. We are definitely seeing a rise in homelessness in Murphy, North Carolina. I've been mayor for 2 years now. We've done a lot of research, we've been in a lot of meetings. I wish I had $1 for every meeting I've been to try to solve this issue.
One more today.
One more today, but I know this one's going to be helpful. It boils down to a housing issue, an affordable housing issue, and it goes back to the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009, when the housing market stopped foreclosures happened, the property values declined then. So we weren't building new houses back then, and the lending standards were tightened. And then COVID happened. We had a surge in demand for housing. Folks wanted to move from the big cities to small towns. In Cherokee County, we had so many people paying cash for homes so they're not going to be foreclosed at that point. We had Airbnb rentals, VRBOs. So our supply just shrunk tremendously with the COVID surge. So with the Great Recession, it went one way, and then COVID, it made it go the other way. So there's not as many houses especially affordable houses with the price increase. And one of the other situations that you and I have talked about before, I did this earlier this week. I went to Google and then I went to ChatGPT AI. I said, give me a list of all the homeless shelters within a 100-mile radius of Murphy, North Carolina. It produced one, and it was located in Murphy, North Carolina. So if you take a map, you draw a circle from Knoxville to Chattanooga to Atlanta to Asheville, we're right in the middle of that. So 2 hours basically to any town. And we're the only shelter that I could find on Google or AI. So what happens is there's ministries out there, they want to make sure to take care of their homeless population, so they end up bringing them to the nearest shelter, and that is Murphy. A lot of times they can't get in, they can't pass a drug test, they can't pass a background check, and if that person has dropped that individual off, they're stuck on the street as homeless in Murphy, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And what I would one day envision, instead of seeing just one shelter in Murphy, our shelter does a great job, but the demand, they don't have the resources to meet the demand that they want to do. It's an overnight shelter. So what happens in the morning, the residents are moved to the streets until the shelter opens up that night. And they just don't have the resources to provide the services that are needed. And a lot of people do end up in Murphy that we support that aren't our local folks. And those folks are in a strange community. And it just creates another level of problems there. So my vision would be I know shelters are just temporary fixes. That's not fixing the housing issue at all. But I would like to see more shelters, and if every community could take care of their own population, I think we could do it well.
Before I open it up to any panelists, I think that you also bring up an interesting point that's other than the fact that there are different, I'm going to call categories of homelessness, there are multitudes of reasons that folks might become homeless, and the lack of affordable housing is one of those.
It's huge.
There are many others, and I'm sure we'll be hearing some of those, but if there's not an affordable place for folks to live, then they're really forced to into some desperate situations. And so I appreciate you pointing that out for us. Would the panelists like to add anything to Mayor Radford's comment?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
I'm curious about the scale of what you're describing. I grew up in Madison County, and I live there now, and everything you're saying makes complete sense to me about what's happening in Western North Carolina, but I'm curious about how many folks you're seeing.
We are actually doing the point-in-time survey on Tuesday, January 31st, so we're planning on getting an accurate count. I know the federal definition of homeless doesn't encompass everyone. I know 2 years ago when I was asking for an approximate number, I did ask for our DSS director at that time, and the estimation was about 400 at that time. So those are not everyone who is visible on the street. Those are the ones that we see, our law enforcement encounters quite often. Our police chief says about 50% or more of the calls for service for our police department involves a homeless person at this point. So that does tie up some resources, although at the same time we do want to support and try to help folks who are in need because we are empathetic as well.
The only thing I want to add is that I'll send you a list of about 15 to 20 homeless facilities between us and you.
Thank you.
There's a bunch.
That is.
And we'll talk more about that in a minute.
Thank you. Mr. Woods, what programs has WCRM implemented that have seen success in getting people back on their feet?
Well, first off, thank you for convening this. This is really useful for our community. You know, at the rescue mission, one of the things that we do, and we do it every day, is that we have the opportunity to see people right in the midst of a crisis. And we start with that we believe everyone's valuable.
Yes.
And so with that being our start, all of our programs are designed around how do we help that person overcome the crisis in the moment, stabilize them, and then help them, walk alongside of them so that they can be productive. And so, even in our overnight shelter, we don't warehouse the homeless. We're not just a shelter where you can come and leave in the morning and come back in the evening. In our overnight shelter, we implemented, starting in 2010, the Joshua program. So the Joshua program is literally this. Anyone that comes and if they need shelter, they are given 3 nights, no questions asked. But during those 3 nights, they're encouraged to sit down with one of our rescue directors. And when they sit down with our rescue director, we then ask them to put together a plan. So the whole part of this is that we want to help you so that you're not here next year. That's the whole goal. So a plan for us has to be in writing, has to have measurable goals, and it has to have things that we can hold you accountable to. So within that, their plan determines their length of stay. Now, since we've implemented this plan, the Joshua plan, currently right now at the rescue mission, we have over 83% of those that are in our overnight shelter, both men and women, are working or in school every single day.
How about a round of applause?
Now, thank you for that, Wade. Now, the thing that we run into is that we have people who are at our mission right now that I think we have over 15 people that have over $10,000 saved in the last 12 months. I think we have 3 or 4 that have over $15,000 saved, and our record has been $24,000 within a year. The problem, they still can't find housing because of, even though they're stable, they're clean, they are accomplishing things that they never thought they would ever be able to do. They still can't find housing. And that's the cog. And so that's just one of our programs. I can talk about our recovery programs. I can talk about a lot of other things there. But we really want to love on people in such a way that when they come to us, they leave and they are productive, and man, they are living their best life. So that's what we do.
Thank you. Thank you for the inspiring story, and definitely for sharing such positive results. And I believe that we want the best. All of us here today want the best for everyone's life. Would anyone like to add anything to Mr. Wood's comment before we move along? Ms. Ball, what prompted the establishment of the new continuum of care in Asheville?
Well, I imagine, first of all, that no one knows what the old continuum of care was either, so I'll start there. So the continuum of care is a federal framework. Can y'all hear me? I know we had a mic. Okay. Continuum of care is a federal framework for how local communities can come together to establish plans, make decisions, implement initiatives, measure what's working, figure out what resources they need, all these things that we've been talking about on this panel. But doing that work together, what's complicated in the work around homelessness is that most of the services are services and efforts have been developed really organically over a long period of time. And there's an array of stakeholders that are involved in that service delivery, none of whom can give any direction to the others, right? So no one on this panel has authority over anyone else on this panel, and everyone on this panel is working on homelessness. And so in the absence of a consolidated planning effort, what we end up with is folks moving in a lot of different directions, a lot of very, strong program work happening and strong outreach work happening, but maybe not a streamlined effort. And I would say that's what has happened in our community in Buncombe County, that we have a lot of service provision. We have a lot of folks who are doing very good work, and we don't have a consolidated decision-making table and decision-making or planning platform. So the continuum of care is 3 components, technically. First is a large body of stakeholders, and that should be open to anyone with an interest in homelessness who wants to take action on that issue. That can include everyone in this room, is really a very wide body of anyone with an interest in homelessness. The second is that body elects a board of directors to act on their behalf, and that board should be folks, ideally, and for us, that board should be folks with strong leadership skills who represent partner systems of care, because again, it takes a wide range of actors to really develop effective homelessness response. So we need people like all the folks on this panel. We also need healthcare providers. We certainly need housing providers, as we've just heard. So membership body elects a board of directors representing multiple sectors across systems of care, and that board can then make decisions together. Doesn't mean anyone has authority over anyone else, but does just create a clear platform for folks to come to together to make those collaborative decisions. And then that board designates a lead agency to sort of keep the wheels on the bus, keep the mechanics in motion, convene meetings, et cetera. In our community, that lead agency is the city of Asheville, so my division, the Homeless Strategy Division, fulfills that responsibility for Buncombe County. Historically, we've never had that membership body. It's just not existed. We've certainly had informal collaboration happening widely, but we've not had a formal planning body. We've not had that formal membership body. The board that we've had has been appointed by city council and county commissioners rather than being elected by that membership body, which means there's been a real disconnect between stakeholders and people, on the ground doing the work, and then the role of that board. And that board hasn't really been set up to be that strong leadership body that's needed on this issue. And so what we're in the process of right now is restructuring all of that to first create that formal membership body. And I will just make a plug for everyone in this room to participate in that. Membership is open right now, will be open on a rolling basis. So establishing that membership body, they will meet for the first time February 29th as a body to vote on a new charter that sort of spells out how all of this works. We've never had that in our community. So again, we've had just confusion. We've had folks moving in different directions. They will vote on a new charter, and then they'll meet again in March to elect that new board. And then the board will set a collective strategy. And this, I can't overstate how participatory this is intended to be. So this is certainly not the Emily Ball Show, and it is just a real opportunity for a group of leaders to come together and make those decisions together. The board will then appoint committees and work groups, and those will all be folks from that membership body to figure out how we move forward together. So as I envision it, what we need in our community is a big variety of services, many of which we do have. I think we have had some historic division that I think is just not necessary. There's plenty of work for everyone right now. We have enormous need in the community. So as I envision it, in this sort of new era under the leadership of this new board, I hope where we end up is services that are, folks understand what their lane is, and all those lanes are coordinated and moving in a common direction. We need a range of services because our homeless population is diverse and people have different needs. Some folks need treatment programs first. Some people need other resources first. We need that full range, but we need it to be well coordinated and moving in a common direction. So I'm very excited about what's happening right now. I have a lot of optimism about what that restructure can mean for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anybody here on the panel have a follow-up or a question to Ms. Ball? All right, moving right along, Reverend Rogers, how do the programs at ABCCM that have been implemented help individuals to build pathways to community so that they have support systems that unisolate them and provide accountability?
Thank you for that question. Thank you for doing this as well, Congressman Edwards, and I just appreciate my colleagues and our public officials. Isn't it nice when we can have a conversation and not a debate? Amen. All right. And so I really appreciate that foundation that you and others are laying here. So thank you very much. My part of the conversation and that question is just so jam-packed full. I guess I want to start with the fact that ABCCM, as first of all, a coalition of 300 congregations of all stripes and colors and sizes and across the spectrums, no matter how wide you want to draw it, left or right. But they all agree on one thing through the great work of 5,000 plus volunteers, which is we may argue and debate over doctrinal things or philosophical or political things at our place. Just like the rescue mission, we all agree on first loving and the dignity of every person that comes through the door. Second, we all agree that the greatest gift we can give every one of those persons is a choice. Third thing we agree on, that again the rescue mission does as well, is we know that if we give them that choice, they then just need certain skills to address those underlying causes. And if we provide the information sometimes, or the skills, or the access, it does lead to their fulfilling their greater potential or achieving their goals, however they choose to describe that, and we get to celebrate those things. And so what's unique about ABCCM is that we have 7 ministries. We cover all those what are frequently referred to in health and human services as social determinants of health. We call them ministry determinants of health because they were listed a long time before social stuff came along. And so that is providing people with the basics of food and nutrition, with shelter, and also with education, training that leads to jobs, as well as access to health care, and overcoming some of those other fuzzy-wuzzy barriers like transportation and so on. So having said that, the other piece I want to share with you is that we really also focus on what we call the root causes. We just did a training with 60 new volunteers, for example, around homelessness. And some of the things I want us to understand that the Rescue Mission, us, Homeward Bound, Salvation Army work on is the fact that what is talked about often are symptoms, mental health, depression, or addictions and substance use, but those are symptoms to these underlying issues of, first of all, loss. When we start to understand that the average homeless person in the last year has experienced as many as 10, 15, 20 serious losses in succession. And what I'll tell you is that on the life change unit scale that was developed 35, 40 years ago, they said if you have more than 5 serious losses in a year, you're dysfunctional and unable to function. Do you understand the scale of loss that I'm talking about? And so that's why we also have to deal with then the trauma and the fact, and the rescue mission, Michael just said it, we have to help folks stabilize, right? And we're talking about losses in lots of other different areas. I mean, sexual violence, physical violence, things stolen, loss of home, loss of job, domestic violence, interpersonal partner violence. I mean, whatever of those categories, what you need to understand is that folks that are on the streets and are chronically on the streets have experienced these losses. So that's why Emily so wonderfully said we need lots of different resources. One emergency shelter in Murphy isn't going to address veterans issues, domestic violence issues, sexual trauma. You get it, right? And so when we start to do that, we believe that you've got to have not only a lot of different resources, but you also have to have a lot of different approaches. And those approaches are, yes, some people just need what I call a lily pad. 30, 60, 90 days, they'll be fine. But other folks need a much longer transitional housing process. Can you do that in permanent supportive housing? Yes. And do you have wraparound services? So without getting into a lot of the weeds of those, we really believe that, yes, communities need different approaches and to pull together, as Emily's saying, that our city and county are doing now, which we really appreciate, so that we can address those. But as Michael alluded to and is doing, we've got to create then responsible pathways for folks, don't we? So once somebody stabilizes, then there's what are called coping skills, life skills. Those have to lead, in our opinion, to then also education and job training, but not just job training that goes into flipping burgers or flipping beds or clipping grass. We're talking about scalable career level skills, right? That leads to the kind of income that the rescue mission and us see folks when they have that kind of a plan. We call it steps to success, that are then able to help folks find those pathways. It can be out of substance use and a recovery living plan. It can be for those who are disabled, because there are different disabled and or what we call disability pathways. There are pathways for those that are trying to reunite their families and their children. I mean, those are huge pieces, and when we give everybody those skills, then we create those. So in those ways, Congressman, we find that 8 out of 10 who go through what we call this steps to success developmental process, 8 out of 10 graduate and leave us and never come back to homelessness. And so the answer is not that we create a lily pad that people jump in and then just come right back on, but that, as Michael was saying, we all create these pathways so that they continue to thrive as individuals with their families and, of course, make stronger communities. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Reverend Rogers. We appreciate everything that ABCCM is doing for this region. I'm just going to add a comment before I see if anybody else wants to chime in on what you had to say. That an illustration of the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. is this. And one of the reasons that I and my staff, many are here, I hope I get a chance to introduce all of them to you before we depart, are so interested in this issue is that we get so many folks that climb aboard the Carolina Cruiser that are either homeless or close to homeless or know someone who is homeless. Well, our caseworkers who are back here, Lisa and Natalie and Madeline, came up to D.C. to a conference just a few weeks ago on handling cases. And what reminds me to tell you this is you talking about the collaboration here locally. We were debriefing after their conference, and I asked them, what did you learn that we don't already know? And they said, we're doing it all wrong. Well, what are you talking about? And they said, well, the ethics department said that we cannot recommend any nonprofit to anyone. And that shocked me. And I said, well, why? And they said, that shows that we're choosing one nonprofit over another. And you probably haven't noticed that the federal government doesn't have a homeless shelter in this area. And so when these folks climb aboard the Carolina Cruiser, we're very interested to try to get them some help and resources because they need it quick. They're not waiting for 90 days for a Section 8 approval or any of that. And so my direction to my staff is forget what the ethics department said. And they acted shocked, and I said, well, just let somebody sue me. Let somebody challenge me for trying to get somebody in Western North Carolina the help that they need. And so if anybody's out there listening, thinking about challenging us on that, bring it on. So thank you for that. Did anybody else have anything to add to Reverend Rogers' statement? Mayor Pro Tem Simpson from my hometown, a study by the North Carolina Housing Coalition found that 44% of renters in Henderson County and 46% overall in Western North Carolina struggle to keep up with their monthly payments. What could you share about the committee that you'd like to establish in Hendersonville to combat housing affordability?
Thank you, Congressman Edwards, for inviting me to be a part of this and for everybody that has joined us
Will you bring
today.
the microphone up just a little closer?
Yes. Is that better?
I
Okay.
think so.
According to the numbers from the NC Housing Coalition, 25% of Henderson County households are cost burdened by their housing, which means they're paying 30% or more of their income towards housing. Housing availability and affordability is a topic of discussion at almost every meeting we have in Hendersonville, and I'm assuming it's the same for everybody up here at this table today. It affects the quality of life for our current residents and visitors. It's a huge factor in attracting quality economic development projects and for keeping our existing workforce in the area. Hendersonville and Henderson County's economy runs on 4 main sectors: manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, and tourism. And while our employers in the area are trying their best to keep up with wage increases and benefits, there's a huge discrepancy between the cost of housing and employee pay. The city of Hendersonville is an employer itself, and we have had a lot of trouble getting and retaining employees because they can't find housing in our area. And according to that same study, a fair market rent in Henderson County for 2024 is $1,680 a month, which would require an hourly wage of $32.31 an hour or an annual salary of $67,200. And that would be what you need to not be cost burdened by your housing. That study also found that fair market rents have increased by 69% in the last 5 years. When we moved here in 2016, our rent was like $875, and when we bought our house 2 years ago, we left and our rent was almost $1,300 a month. Nothing had changed in our apartment. There were no new appliances, no new fittings, nothing, no amenities. It just went up exponentially. So there's so much research out there about policy and building options that you can help combat housing affordability, but it's hard to sift through all of it and really evaluate what exactly would work well for Hendersonville. Additionally, we know our community is really looking for opportunities to provide feedback and comments on housing, especially with all of the struggles that they're having. So by establishing the Affordable Housing Committee, we can not only provide that space for the community to come together and provide input, but we can form a group of individuals from throughout the community that can sort through all of the ideas and compile the ones that they think would be best for our area.
Thank you. Any questions or follow-up to Mayor Pro Tem Simpson? I apologize. As usual, we've tried to put 20 pounds in a 4-pound sack. And we're going to run out of time in a minute. I do want to open up and see if there are any questions or comments from the audience for a short time. It's clear I'm not going to be able to make it through all of the questions that I had hoped to ask. I can assure you we'll stay in touch. You know where I'm at, and I know where you're at. And so in just a moment, I'm going to see if anyone from the audience would like to ask any of you any questions or make any comment. But I will say before we depart, before we close, and since I'm not going to be able to get to all these questions, I'd like to do a lightning round and just go down the table and ask all of you one question and give you about 1 minute to tell this group and myself and anyone that is contacted or following the media out here what it is that you would want us to know about the homeless problem in western North Carolina, what we should do or should not do. So just be thinking about your lightning round and your 1 minute response. With that, I have a couple of staff members. Tommy Lauder here is a regional field rep. He's got a microphone. And Lake Silver over here, a regional field rep with my office, has a microphone. Does anyone in the audience have a question for these panelists? I saw your hand up first. Yes, yeah. So if you want to just come on down real quick. And
Are we on? Marjorie McGurk, proud resident of Buncombe County. You mentioned both calamities, successions of horrible things that put people in the situation. And you also mentioned the impossible cost of housing. Where should we, as a private citizen, put most of our efforts? Building more compass points where we convert hotels into cheap housing? Put dormitories on AB Tech campuses? Or is there something upstream we can do to block the crises and intervene before they result in unhoused people?
which panelists would like to take that on? All right, Reverend.
Yeah, so we've been talking about this around the COC, so let me just offer a quick response. One is we need better data. Emily would say that, I think, very quickly. And number two, with that, to get that data, we need to do a better job of doing what Congressman Edwards said, which is having people sit down with folks and find out who are they, where'd they come from, what's going on in some of those underlying issues, and what are some reasonable solutions that could address that don't require housing. Then really identify what does require housing and the different types along the spectrum. And that will give us some really good ways to understand the impact of outreach, as well as assessment, as well as developing a whole range of strategies.
Thank you. I saw some other hands. How about right here? Step up to Lake and
You all for being here. I'm Chris Robinson with the Tribune Papers, and I've talked, Reverend Rogers, with some of your people. So this is kind of a twofold question. How many of the people that are homeless in our area are actually temporarily homeless versus chronic or vagrants? Mm-hmm. And some of your people that I spoke with said you're also working to try to keep people from becoming homeless, which would be the ideal. What are you doing towards that?
So let me take the last one first. Our crisis ministries, we have 4 of them, and we talked about the Beacon Network, Buncombe Emergency Assistance Coordinating Network, which is all about prevention. So, we've helped some 400 families from becoming evicted, and we're feeding folks every day, helping with utility assistance. So there's always a number of things we can do that way that's been built in really to a number of social services programs that started at Aid with Families with Dependent Children and have expanded into emergency food and shelter and a number of public programs to complement what we're doing locally. Statistic-wise, I probably defer to Emily on the percentage of chronically homeless and those that are kind of in between. We could slice and dice that. I think in the interest of time, I'd rather Emily speak to that if I can put you on the spot.
Well, we, like you, are about to do our point-in-time count. I lost you in the audience. We are about to do our point-in-time count this coming Tuesday as well, so all the data in my mind is a year old at this point. But my recollection from last year's count is that about 22% of our population was chronically homeless folks, meaning they'd been
homeless for at least a year and they have some kind of disability. But certainly we have a range of people experiencing homelessness. We have folks who are about to tip over, who are just right on the edge, just one crisis away. We have people who have just become homeless, where we have a really specific moment in time where we have opportunity to get them back to some stability. And then certainly a range of people, I would say the majority of people who are not yet chronically homeless, don't have those complex needs, also don't have no needs, and I'd say the majority of folks in our community are people in that kind of big middle section who need some shorter term support to get stable and then won't need to re-enter homelessness.
Thank you. Can I see some other hands? Back here in the back on the corner. We've probably got time for about 2 more questions, and then we'll get to our lightning round. Ask Tommy your question.
I have a question. I live here in the city of Asheville. We have a lot of tourism, and money comes in from that. And what I want to know is that the money that comes back to us, could we put that to affordable housing and stuff to see if we can alleviate this problem some? Because I'm tired of all this money coming in, and it's not helping anybody in the city of Asheville.
Right. Would anybody here like to take that question on?
The answer for common sense people would be yes, but when we're talking about a government who spends the money before it comes in, the answer is no. And I think I'm really trying to gaslight some things because I really think that some of the efforts that are being made around affordable housing isn't actually affordable for those who need it. And I think we have to have a collaboration of people that are willing to look at housing differently and think of it differently and understand that there are so many different needs, and there has to be a real effort, not just a political statement that's made every time someone's running for a city or a council or a county position. They always throw out affordable housing, but affordable housing isn't affordable to the majority of people.
All right.
Can I,
Thank
if
you
I
for
can,
that question.
can I add?
One-
Could I
one-
add real quick? I'm sorry. No.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yes, please, go ahead.
Sorry. The tourism is taxed there's a very particular tax structure that is governed by the Tourism Development Authority in our community. And I'm probably saying that incorrectly, maybe managed by the Tourism Development Authority, but there's a state legislation that specifies the structure of how that tax revenue can be used. So your question is, we're getting all this tourism here, and there are tourism dollars, tourism taxes. How can that benefit our community? There is a particular state structure that does somewhat account for that, but that is managed by the Tourism Development Authority.
Thank you. Gentleman from the third row over here on the end will get the last question if you'll come down to Sea Lake.
You have to go meet him.
Thank you all for this opportunity. The one thing that I don't have a good understanding of, what is affordable housing in a community where we're up to $22.10 as a living wage? Affordable housing is different to different people, but when it's $400,000 for a first-time home buyer, it gets complicated. And my question is, that's one thing that nobody has a good understanding on. What is affordable housing?
So I think I heard somebody touch on that just a little bit earlier.
I'm saying affordable housing to the average person, not in a guy gonna throw up 100 housing and he says, I'm gonna fix the middle ground, and the middle ground is 500 to 700,000. That's not solving. That's not going anywhere near the people that you're concerned about. I think you are closer to addressing this issue if you're addressing it at the beginning of it, when people And there are funds available when people are about to lose their home because they have jobs, and if they late 2 times, they terminate their leases. If we had somewhere to plug that, where the people that are renting houses know they can get their money, if you got people having problems, you have a better chance with some of the folks you're talking about.
Thank you. Ms. Simpson, looks like you're prepped and ready to take that one on.
I am ready because this topic frustrates me to no end. So technically, affordable housing would be 50 to 120% of your annual median income. But the annual median income is not in line with what the cost of housing is. So like I said earlier, in order to afford fair market rent in Henderson County, you have to make $67,000 a year. And I don't know too many people, specifically the people that would be living in Henderson County. I mean, we have a pretty aging population. We have a lot of young families moving in. I don't know too many of them that are making $67,000 a year. So there's discrepancies between like the HUD guidelines of what falls under affordable housing and what is actually affordable. So if there's some way that we could adjust those guidelines, I think that might do a lot to help. And then I think the other struggle is being able to find developers that are really willing to work with municipalities and local governments to be able to build some more affordable and attainable housing. There's only so many tax credits that are going to be out there, and like I know in our community, we only have a very few pieces of land that actually would qualify for those tax credits. But to find a developer who is in business to make money, being willing to lose a little bit off of their profit to be able to build something that's affordable, and an incentive to keep it affordable is just extremely hard to find. I'm one of those people that when I ran for election, I campaigned on affordable housing. And unfortunately, for the last 4 years, I don't really feel like I've done a whole lot to do that. But a lot of that's been because our hands are tied in certain situations, or we do have money coming in from tourism, but it's tied to other things and it's allocated to this, or we had COVID come in, and so that kind of sidetracked everything. And so it's a really complex issue that no one, I think, has come up with a magic bullet for, but until we can get the actual affordable housing guidelines to be more in line with what people can afford, I think we're going to continue to have this problem.
I would, and I appreciate your response. I would just add, being a resident of Henderson County, I think the city of Hendersonville has done quite a bit to address affordable housing, maybe in an indirect way. And I say that because the cost of anything, affordability is measured by cost, and cost is often measured by, or the result of inventory. And I think Hendersonville's done just a remarkable job of finding ways to say yes to projects to put more bedrooms in communities, which ultimately increases the supply and makes things more affordable for folks that might not be otherwise. And so I'd like to credit Hendersonville. I've not seen no
Well, thank you.
to a project in quite a while, so thank you for that. So let's do a quick lightning round. I know we're out of time, and we said we'd be finished at 3. I hope you'll stick around for the lightning round, but I certainly understand if you've got other commitments. If I could start down with Mayor Pro Tem Simpson and just ask the question. In about a minute, tell us what you want us to know that you haven't had a chance to talk about so far.
Oh gosh. I think the biggest thing would be, even if you're not someone who needs quote unquote affordable housing, so if you're not cost burdened by your housing, I think it's important to remember that folks in your community are, and that's going to affect your quality of life. If we can't have quality firefighters and nurses and teachers and people that work in the restaurants when you like to go out to eat be able to live in our community, then we're not going to have the workforce there to be able to support our quality of life. So this happened to me whenever I was first running. Somebody said, I don't need affordable housing, why do I care? And I tried to explain to them that affordable housing is something that all of us need, because we need that to be able to support the services that we want to have. And we want to have firefighters that show up, and we want to have teachers that can teach our kids. And we want to have somebody there to fill up our water glass when we go out to eat. And those people need the housing to be affordable. So I think that's the one thing I'd want to leave with everybody.
Thank you, Reverend Rogers.
What I want you to know is that we've got a place, because we are asking you to consider giving 2 to 4 hours of your time once a week or once a month. That's all we're asking. If you'll do that, everybody that shows up lets us see 10 more people. Wouldn't you like to impact 10 lives this year or more? And so we are working on the edges, if you will, of the elephant of needs, but we're taking out big bites and coming up with both local and community and even some systemic solutions by putting together this incredible workforce. Come join us.
Thank you. Round of applause for the Reverend, too. Yes,
I'm
Ms.
going to
Ball.
take some of Michael's time. Just
All
kidding. For me, I think it's two things. Number one, I honestly think that we can do this. I really feel like a true believer in the work of the continuum of care. And I know that's kind of wonky policy speak, but if we come together actually as a community, I honestly think that we can build a system of services that is responsive to the needs of folks in our community. But there is no way to do that if not together. It's not possible for the city of Asheville to do that alone. It's not possible for anyone in this room to do that alone. Critically important for folks to participate in this collaborative process together. And the second thing is kind of similar, I think, for you all, for folks paying attention to this issue. There is, sort of as Scott just said, there is immediately actionable opportunity for you, and we need you to take that action. We need people to get engaged, to volunteer, to donate. We need people to, more than anything else, we need people to remember that homeless folks are just people who don't have housing right now. They're people who are in extraordinary crisis, and we need that human connectivity and compassion, and we need people to be neighbors. I said I grew up in Madison County. My dad tells a story about somebody who used to kind of rotate around to people's houses for a week or two at a time, showed up with his paper bag of belongings, and they took him in, and we don't do that anymore. And I'm not suggesting that you go out and do that today, but I am saying that a little bit of neighborliness will go a very long way in helping stabilize people when they're in trouble.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I guess the first thing I want to say is that the homeless problem here in Buncombe County is solvable. We can actually solve this problem. I know it seems like it's enormous, especially when you pull up to an intersection and you see someone holding a sign and it seems absolutely desperate. But they are phenomenal organizations doing phenomenal work, and we all need your help. The next thing that I want to say is this, because I don't want this thing lost when we talk about affordable housing, and we're talking about housing for those that are gainfully employed and people we want in our community and everything else. We still have to figure out in our community how to create housing for those that we are bringing out of crisis, who have overcome issues, but are still at the bottom rung. So we have to figure out a source of housing that is forward moving. The last thing that the next thing I want to say is this, is that one of the things that I would love to do is I would love to challenge our elected officials, Congressman Edwards included. I believe that Buncombe County, Asheville, Western North Carolina knows what's best for Western North Carolina. And for many years, we've allowed HUD to dictate from DC the way funding should be spent in our community. And it's exacerbated the problem. And so what we've done, even with the Housing First model, is that we've taken people, and we thought that the way to solve homelessness is putting people in housing. But when you put someone that is not healthy, that is not ready for housing, that have experienced trauma, and you stick them into affordable housing, and our affordable housing in our area happens to be the government supportive housing. And so all of a sudden, it changes the culture of that community. So now, that's now become the most unsafe housing. And so that's become a problem, because even if our programs help someone get them stable, they're successful, they're moving forward, and they are able to get an apartment in public housing, it's unsafe for them. And so we have to think about this thing differently. And so my challenge is that if the federal government's going to send money, that we should have some say-so on how that money is going to be spent in our community. HUD doesn't know. HUD does not know what's best for Western North Carolina.
Yeah. So, Mr. Woods, I agree with you that I've not seen anything in Washington, D.C. to indicate that they know better how to handle things than a local community. And so I am really eager to engage more with you on how that could be restructured. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Mayor Radford.
A few things I'd like for you to know and participate in or celebrate in our successes. For example, we're very proud. We have a new workforce housing 56-unit apartment going in behind Walmart in Murphy. That is 40 to 60% of the median income, that kind of range. So that's going to open up some more housing inventory, which is what we need a lot more of. Our town council has recently waived water sewer capacity fees for market rate housing, which has encouraged another housing unit to go in the town of Murphy. And we partner with Dogwood Health Trust for a feasibility study. We have 18 acres of town-owned land for additional workforce housing there as well. Dogwood Health Trust, WNC Housing, they have been fantastic partners, along with our elected leaders and some other folks. A lot of partnerships out there. And we're also not afraid to be copycats. When we see something working, Silva has a great community care pilot program that they do with Western Carolina, so that a social worker from the college can be there with police officers, and that can help in situations where a police officer may not be the best person to handle a mental illness issue, a domestic fight. So we're going to try to do the same thing in Murphy, modeling ours after what Silva is doing, because that has proven to be a good success as well.
All right. Thank you. Captain Brown, bring us home.
I'll do my best. I think from a law enforcement perspective, just being here and being a part of this panel illustrates the changes that we're going through in our industry and how vital it is that we, as a law enforcement community, connect with service providers and professionals that are represented up here on this panel. We're changing the way we do business, and we're changing the way that we see this problem. It's a societal problem that really is at the top of the list, and it has to have a holistic response, and we cannot act independently of those other entities that are trying to provide resources and support for the homeless community. So I think that would be what I would highlight as we're moving forward as a law enforcement community, how we're wanting to engage and stay engaged with what you see up here on this panel.
All right. Thank you. Round of applause. So as we've been discussing, I recognize some of my staff, and while I credited Ms. Jackson as taking point with our policy, with my office's as the policy advisor to lead up homelessness, the issue of homelessness, my entire staff heart goes out and is dedicated to helping the folks here in Western North Carolina. I referenced some of those a while ago. I want to point out to you, Rachel Lapine over here, raise your hand and be recognized. Our district director, Chris Burns, and then our chief of staff, Bronwyn Lance from Leicester, is also extremely dedicated. And I hope I didn't leave any of our staff out. They work really hard on your behalf, and they work very hard to help pull this together. The thing that I think that we may have accomplished today is opening up a dialogue. And even though many of us have had conversations, and I know that you've had many conversations with my staff, we've had the Carolina Cruiser out to some of these places, I still heard things today and learned things today that I did not know. And so this has been helpful for me. I think that what I'd like for my role as the congressman of this district to be is to continue to facilitate conversation and collaboration. What I know the solution is not, and Michael, you pointed it out, and that's Washington, D.C., whether it's with policy or whether it's with dollars. And just an illustration, I had asked Madeline, Miss Jackson, to pull together some numbers on how much we spent from Washington, D.C. on the issue of housing and Section 8 and tax credits and that sort of thing. And it's in the hundreds of billions of dollars. It comes to reality for me that looking to Washington, D.C. to continue to plow enormous amounts of money into communities is probably not the answer. The better answer is how much better can we spend that money? How do we need to formulate solutions that fit particular communities, and how we need to talk with one another and encourage and collaborate. I'd like to thank all of you for your attention and being here. And I'd like to ask you to give just a huge round of applause to our panelists for taking time to be here. With that, thank you all. Have a great afternoon. I bet the panelists will stick around a few minutes if you've got specific questions for them. Oh.